But we're going to start today with Eli Pariser, whose book The Filter Bubble has already introduced a new phrase to arguments about the internet and its use. He believes personalised searching, which seems so handy, is actually shrinking our imaginations and dividing us dangerously. Let's start, if we could, Eli, by explaining exactly what happens when you search. We all, or most of us, search for things on the internet all the time, whether they're things we want to buy or whether they're simply bits of information that we're looking for. What happens to that information?
Well, it goes to the search engine that then uses it to customize your next searches. So it used to be the case that we all saw the same thing when we Googled something. We saw sort of the results that Google thought were authoritative. And now it's much more subjective. We each see different results based on what we've clicked on before, based on who Google thinks we are, and what it thinks we'll be interested in, and what it predicts that we're likely to click next.
And so this is a radical narrowing of our possible range of reference. We were always told that the internet was going to open up to us this great, fantastic, worldwide treasure trove of information and viewpoints, and in fact, you would argue the opposite is happening.
Well, that's right, and it's because these companies basically are looking at how do we provide sort of a very narrow version of relevance. That's the watchword. How do we make things more relevant? And what that means to them is how do we make people click things more, stay on our site longer, view more pages, and the best way to do that is to provide them with information they're likely to like.
So they might say, listen, all we're doing is we're giving you what you like. That's what companies do. That's what the market does.
Right, and I think the problem is that actually, they say, we're giving you what you want, and what you want is a complicated phrase. We all want lots of mutually contradictory things. We want to eat cake and we want to be thin. And the best media actually help us sort of balance those two inner selves, the more compulsive short-term self that, just wants the celebrity gossip, and the more sort of citizenship or civic-minded oriented self that wants to be informed about the world. What this filtering process will do is it will tend to feed, it'll feed that short-term, more compulsive clicker in you more than it feeds the sort of longer-term, more aspirational self.
So I can see that if I buy the Times newspaper, I might read it and I go from page to page and my eye's caught by things I didn't think I wanted to know about. But when I see that, I think, well, maybe actually I do want to know about that. And I can see that the internet search engines don't necessarily do that. But isn't it possible for an intelligent provider of information on the internet, or Google or whoever, to put in enough randomization and extra stuff and important stuff to deal with the problem?
Well, I think, the question is, how do you do this personalization right? Right now, it's solely optimized to show you sort of the things that you're most likely to click, the information junk food, if you will. You could actually build in other variables into this. You could have next to the Facebook like button an important button that actually allowed people to signal, this matters. This is about something real. You could gather that information. The question is whether these companies will, whether they want to. I think the thing is that, if you look at a newspaper front page, there's a huge amount of kind of editorial thinking and values that go into sort of shaping that set of information. It's diverse, it's representative. That hasn't made its way into the algorithms that are increasingly showing us what we see online.
And the other difference would be that although newspapers tend to be biased politically, we all know, or indeed television can be, but we make the choices. We know that we're picking up a liberal newspaper if we pick up The Guardian, or a right-of-centre newspaper if we pick up The Telegraph. But what's going on in the internet is hidden from us. Those choices are being made, but we're not making them consciously.
That's right, and that's very disturbing, because the way you get into trouble is when you have a distorted view of the world and you don't even know it. And in this case, you're getting this sort of feedback loop where Google is showing you more things that it thinks you want to see, but you're not aware of that. You don't know who Google thinks you are. You don't know on what basis it's sorting information, and as a result, you don't really have a sense of what's being left out, the unknown unknowns.
You've mentioned Google and you've mentioned Facebook, but tell us a little bit about the unknown companies that spend their entire time hoovering up all the rest of the information about us and then passing it on.
Well, what I discovered was that there's actually sort of a behavior market being created. Every click on a website is becoming a commodity that can be sold to companies like Axiom and Blue Kai, these sort of, these companies lurking in the shadows who gather immense amounts of data.
So if I go out and buy a cagoule or a pair of walking boots or something, they will know about it and they will pass that information about me.
That's right.
Onto search engines.
In fact, it can be auctioned off in a matter of milliseconds. I mean, sometimes you literally can take one action on a website over here and have another website customize itself on the basis of that action without any apparent connection between the two.
It's astonishing. And finally, before we open this up, you would argue that what this is doing is it's dividing people into smaller and smaller, mutually incomprehending factions. A little bit as if we were only listening to talk radio that of a kind that supported our prejudices.
That's right. Yeah, I think we're drifting further and further from sort of a common view of what's happening in the world, and without even knowing it, we're being reflected our own views. We're hearing our own views reflected back.
Tim Harford.
Well, Eli, you don't mention blogs or Twitter in your book very much. You just touch on them briefly. And it seems to me they are one way of bursting this filter bubble. Personally, I get a lot of my reading material via blogs and Twitter. They are filtered to some extent, but they're filtered by me, by my choices. There's no hidden algorithm. I mean, do you think that these are a possible solution, or do you think that they're going to fade out, they'll be replaced by these more invisible processes?
Well, I do think, when you look at, say, Facebook versus Twitter, Facebook is used so much more than Twitter, and it's now driving a lot of the traffic to news websites or blogs. So you have this sort of this company in the middle of that transaction that is using this kind of personalization and is deciding which content you see and you don't. I think Twitter can be very useful for I follow Karl Rove on Twitter, even though I don't agree with him, and I hear what he has to say. But even Twitter is moving more in this direction. So recently they announced that they're adding this sort of personalized search results to the way that you traverse Twitter.
So it spreads. Priya.
I just wanted to ask you, that the internet is clearly a sort of double-edged tool. It's got lots of information. It can make democratic movements possible. It can make interaction and dialogue possible. But what I've read of what you've said is also very chilling. How do we then, as netizens or internet citizens, reclaim the internet in ways away from this filtering and actually enrich our experience of it? In some sense, get back the agency we seem to be losing.
Yeah, well, I think, it starts with actually just seeing how this all works, because one of the dynamics at play here is that these companies, there's sort of this transaction. We're handing over quite valuable personal information that can be translated directly into money for these companies, yet the companies try to make that transaction as opaque as possible. We don't actually, see it at work.
There's a phrase you use in the book, something along the lines of, if you're not paying for it, you're being sold. You're a commodity.
That's right. If you're not paying for the service, then you're the product being sold. And I think, changing those dynamics would help us relate to these companies in a different way, so that we might demand more of them. We might say, you know what, this isn't actually a free service. We're paying for this, and we want it to feed, sort of our better selves, our society as a whole.
Andrew Dennis.
I hate to say this on the BBC, but it seems to me, Eli, your book makes a fantastic case for public service broadcasting and its continued relevance in the modern world, including, of course, public service websites. The BBC is a phenomenally successful website. It's probably most people's main source of news on the web, as well as a broadcaster.
That's why they're against us.
And, of course, those who are competing are against. What do you think about the future of public service broadcasting in the context of these filter bubbles?
Well, I think, this does highlight one of the dangers of having a huge amount of sort of what the public gets to know flow through these private entities that have other interests at heart. And I think we'll need institutions like public service broadcasting or education or libraries that can help fill in some of the information that may not get to us, in our search results or on Facebook. I think the challenge here is that this is a hugely efficient service. What's happening is that you're sort of sifting out just the most delectable little information tidbits, and you're going to have to kind of bring people back to the stuff that's a little harder to get your head around, but actually more rewarding.
And we have to learn how to turn off all the controls and so on as well.
That's true, yeah.